This woman was abandoned by her husband because she was too ugly. Out of anger, she took off her 30 million jewelry necklace and threw it into the sea. But when she finished throwing it away and left, she suddenly regretted it, because she needed to work for many years to be able to afford that necklace, and quickly took off her jacket and tried to fish the necklace up. And this scene was also seen by a man in the distance. The man was preparing to come to the rescue. However, he never expected that he had overestimated his abilities. He had already drunk a lot of seawater before he reached the woman, and searched for a long time but couldn't find the necklace. Just then she saw the man desperately calling for help, and was stunned. She had to swim quickly to the man. She grabbed the man's hair and dragged him directly to the shore, seeing that Jack had already lost consciousness, and quickly sent a wave of energy. After her rescue, Jack finally woke up, but unexpectedly, Jack embraced Anne in his arms. He encouraged Anne not to lose hope in life even if she was dumped, and then realized that she had been taken for someone who had tried to commit suicide. To express Jack's concern for her, and decided to drop him off at his home on the way. However, no one expected that they would be neighbors across the street. Facing this sudden coincidence, both of them felt a bit unbelievable. At this time, Jack suddenly remembered that he and Anne had not eaten yet, so he made a globally shocking kimchi soup and sent it to Anne, and said that it was to repay Anne for pulling him out of the sea, and didn't want to accept because of the many strange coincidences today, but then thought that she was in need of someone to drink with, so she invited Jack into the house. When Jack saw the table full of food and wine, he was a little surprised, but Anne calmly told him that when someone is heartbroken, they should eat more nutritious food. Jack was still in a daze, when Anne skillfully poured a glass of wine, and then added some drink to it. Jack was dumbfounded by this skilled operation. After a few drinks, the two of them got along better and better, but when they introduced themselves to each other, they were shocked again. It turned out that they were actually classmates in elementary school, and in one of the performances in the elementary school art show, Jack played the leading role. According to the plot, he was supposed to give Anne, who played the heroine, a kiss, but at the critical moment, Jack ran to throw up because he had a bad stomach. Suddenly, Anne became the laughingstock of the whole school. The other children all laughed at Anne because they said she was so ugly that Jack couldn't bring himself to kiss her. This made Anne lose face as a child. In a fit of anger, she flew straight at Jack, without saying a word, and opened Jack's delivery package. When the classmates saw Jack's little pepper, they were all embarrassed. Since then, the two have been enemies at school, and Jack has also been left with a huge psychological shadow ever since. He usually doesn't wear a belt and is afraid to go out. Now, faced with his former nemesis, Jack wanted to get his revenge, but Anne said that this incident was not worth mentioning compared to being dumped by her boyfriend. Then Anne began to cry tearfully, complaining that her boyfriend had dumped her today. Jack, who was standing nearby, felt more and more pity for her, stimulated by the alcohol. He couldn't help but put his head close to her. Jack said that this was to make up for the kiss he had once owed her, and thought this was crazy enough, but didn't expect Jack to say that he wanted to take her to do something even crazier. The next day, Anne woke up to a phone call from her best friend, wishing her luck in her remarriage, and was so angry that she didn't know what to do. She wanted to tell her best friend about how her boyfriend had dumped her, but then she noticed a childish ring on her finger, and all kinds of fancy underwear scattered around the room. As she tried to remember what had happened the day before, she realized that she had been proposed to. Jack also received a phone call from his friends soon after. Jack thought his friends were joking, but when he saw the photo his friends sent him, he realized that he and Anne had registered for marriage. Faced with this magical situation, the two of them let out a squeal of joy. They began to try to remember what had happened, and then they remembered that yesterday, after getting drunk, they had run to the Civil Affairs Bureau and cried out that they wanted to register for marriage. The man handling the registration saw that the two of them were not in a normal state of mind and asked them to find a witness. So Jack called his good friend Alan, and Alan witnessed the two of them performing a fancy marriage proposal on the spot. After understanding what had happened, the two of them regretted it, and hurriedly ran to knock on Jack's door, but she found that Jack was not at home. So Anne planned to call Jack, but the outrageous thing was that Anne did not have Jack's phone number at all. She had no choice but to call the Civil Affairs Bureau to inquire how to cancel the marriage registration, but the other party informed them that their situation could only be handled by divorce, and almost died in place after hearing this. Soon Jack returned to the apartment. As soon as they saw each other, they cursed at each other's families. After they got tired of arguing, Jack noticed the underwear scattered on the floor and in the room. He hurriedly asked Anne if something had happened between them, and said firmly that nothing had happened. However, Jack was confused when he heard this, because the smell on the underwear was the same as the liquid in his body. The two of them suddenly felt a chill down their backs, so they hurriedly and angrily ran to the Civil Affairs Bureau. The two of them asked the staff to give a reasonable explanation, and the staff was also very angry after hearing it. You were the ones who wanted to get married yesterday, and now you're the ones who want to cancel the marriage registration. Is getting married a joke? After lecturing the two, the staff member told the truth. It turned out that the staff member did not accept their marriage registration yesterday, but persuaded Alan and them to come back when they were sober. After learning that it was a false alarm, the two were finally relieved. Then the two went to the coffee shop and felt very embarrassed about such a bad incident. After discussing it, they decided not to mention it again. Then the two awkwardly said goodbye. After Jack left and looked at the cafe, she remembered that she and her ex-husband also ended up in a cafe. She remembered the once swear-to-be true vows and how they gradually drifted apart, and still feels heartbroken. However, life still has to go on, so one can only let go of everything. But who would have thought that not long after, when Anne went out to eat, she accidentally saw her ex-husband, facing her ex-husband after many years, and still felt strong emotional fluctuations. So she tidied herself up and walked over to her ex-husband. But just as she was about to say hello, she noticed a busty beauty standing next to her ex-husband, and was instantly stunned. She quickly turned around and took the opportunity to hide in shame, seeing that her ex-husband was so happy, and felt very uncomfortable afterwards, and complained to her girlfriends that her ex-husband's girlfriend was using her ample figure to mock her, because her ex-husband had said he was unhappy with her and that was why they divorced. But Anne felt that her ex-husband only cared about her not having a good figure. However, her girlfriends didn't react at all after hearing this, because her friend Mary had been sleeping in a separate room from her husband for 7 years, and her husband was pressuring her for a divorce every day, while her friend Ella hadn't kissed a man in 3,000 days, and her 15-centimeter mouth was growing moss, and her best friend Amy is getting married, but she's marrying someone she doesn't really love. So in their opinion, Anne's situation is not worth mentioning, although her best friends all advised Anne not to be so sensitive, and just couldn't let it go. So when she was introducing a client to a remarriage candidate, the client wanted a young and busty beauty, and instead yelled at the client. She said that only women without breasts can save the world. Women with big breasts are just a waste of resources. The client was so angry that he left on the spot. Mary was also very angry when she saw Anne drive the client away. She scolded Anne for not being able to work with emotions as a remarriage agency, but Anne just couldn't swallow that. Mary saw this and drove in to talk things out with her ex-husband, and then asked her ex-husband out. She bluntly asked her ex-husband why he divorced her. Her ex-husband still said the same thing. He was not happy with her, but Anne didn't believe him. She asked him if it wasn't because he had another woman. However, her ex-husband said that they were unhappy because they always distrusted each other. In the end, the meeting between the two of them also ended in a quarrel, which made the few remaining good memories disappear, and then returned home with a depressed mood. But just as she returned downstairs, she heard some bad news. A beautiful woman had choked to death while eating fried chicken. This woman, she had seen her when she left home in the morning. The woman had proudly shown her attractive buttocks at the time, and was so shocked that she almost wet her pants. She concluded that this was all a tragedy caused by being single, and decided that from now on, she would never eat fried chicken again. And just to be sure, she called her best friend. She asked her friend to call her from time to time to check that she was still alive, and thought that this would be foolproof. But when she lay down, she felt dizzy, and she accidentally fell off the bed, and suddenly felt the fear of death sweep over her. She used all her strength to finally dial for help. However, due to the negligence of the male firefighter during the rescue, Anne was sent to the hospital wearing sexy lingerie. What was even more embarrassing was that the doctor who received her happened to be Alan. When Alan examined Anne's body, he saw her sexy outfit. Alan was so shy that he didn't know where to look. After a thorough examination, Alan told Anne that she had just had an episode of otolithiasis and was fine, and was finally relieved. To prevent Anne from being so embarrassed, Alan took off his work clothes and put them on her. Faced with such a warm-hearted handsome guy, Anne was deeply moved, and was then taken to the lobby to receive Anne for. Alan mistakenly thought that Anne and her best friend Jack were husband and wife. He also praised Anne for having such good taste, but what he didn't expect was that Anne kept staring at Alan like a lovesick girl. Just as Alan didn't know what to do, and directly confessed her love. But Alan mistakenly thought that she was his best friend's fiancée. He immediately asked Anne if she was hallucinating because she was sick. However, firmly said that she had a crush on him. Seeing Alan's confused expression, Anne was going to explain to him that she was not her friend's fiancée. But just then, her best friend Ella arrived at the hospital in a hurry. Without saying a word, she began to offer her humanitarian care. When Ella found out that Anne was wearing a doctor's uniform, she thought Anne was playing some kind of new trick. Ella forcibly removed Anne's clothes, but when she opened it, she discovered Anne had just been sent to the hospital because she didn't have a jacket on. Ella was shocked. Alan was also very embarrassed. At that moment, a patient with an emergency was rushed to the hospital. Alan got up and left. Anne's embarrassing confession was left unresolved. She then ended her treatment. Before leaving, Anne asked the nurse if she could keep the uniform for now and return it later. After learning that Anne was wearing simple pajamas underneath, the nurse agreed cheerfully. Anne, because she was wearing simple pajamas, instantly became the talk of the hospital. When she got home and looked at the work clothes she had brought back, She regretted it because of her impulsive confession and was embarrassed and humiliated. Meanwhile, Jack finally arrived at the hospital after being notified by Alan. After learning that Anne had been discharged from the hospital, Jack chatted with Alan. At that time, Alan realized that Anne and Jack were just casual friends. They asked him to be their witness because they were drunk. After understanding the situation, Alan also had a good impression of Anne. The next day, Anne carefully ironed the work clothes, but when she was about to return them, she hesitated because she was worried that Alan would think of her as a strange woman. In order to solve this problem, Anne asked Jack out. She was just about to ask Jack to explain to Alan. Unexpectedly, Jack said he had already explained to Alan and was overjoyed. The next day, she happily went to Alan with the work clothes. She once again expressed her love for Alan. However, what she did not expect was that Alan refused without hesitation and said that he did not want to get caught in a love triangle with his best friend and wanted to continue emphasizing that she and Jack were just acquaintances and would not hurt anyone. However, Alan said that he did not want to destroy the relationship between friends because Anne was not special enough for him to do so and was very sad after hearing this, but she could only leave in disappointment. However, what she did not expect was that soon after, Alan found Jack. Alan directly asked Jack if he had any feelings for Anne. Jack had a crush on Anne, but in the end he denied it. After getting the answer he wanted, Alan went to Anne's company. He submitted his information and asked Anne to help him find a remarriage partner, and instantly felt a sense of crisis. She was very uneasy throughout the entire consultation process. Alan saw that he had already gotten the answer he wanted, so he got up and left without registering as a member. And Alan's senseless visit also made Anne feel very puzzled. In order to understand Alan's true intentions, after work, Anne found him again, and persuaded Alan to register as a member of their company. But Alan once again refused without hesitation, and then immediately offered him a lot of preferential terms. But Alan said he didn't go to their company to register but to show himself, and felt a bit angry when she heard this, feeling she had been made a fool of. Unexpectedly, Alan said he would not register as a member, because if he did, he could not date Anne. After all, the company rules state that remarriage agencies cannot date clients, and couldn't believe it when she heard this. She even asked Alan to slap her to prove that she wasn't dreaming. Alan, however, simply put his arms around her. From this moment on, the two of them officially established a romantic relationship, and then asked Alan why he had accepted her. Alan answered honestly. When Anne was still a member of the girl group, he was already a fan. At that time, the most popular member was Lily. However, Alan loved Anne. When he learned that the girl group had disbanded, he was saddened for a long time. When she found out that Alan had been her biggest fan, and was proud to have been a member of the girl group. Soon after, Anne and her girlfriends went for a gynecological checkup. After the examination, Anne took her friends to a distance to spy on Alan. Just as they were chatting happily, they were stopped by a little girl. Before they could react, the little girl began to proclaim her ownership. She said that Alan was her man, and that she would marry Alan when she reached the legal age of marriage. Faced with a challenge to her scarce spousal rights, Anne's hormones soared. She immediately reprimanded the little girl in an adult manner. But the little girl didn't know any martial arts and immediately showed off her two small buns. She mocked Anne for only growing in age but not in body, and knew that her buns were not big, and she conceded defeat on the spot. Soon after, the results of the gynecological examination came out. After a battle with her best friend, and won with a uterus age of 29. She was 34 years old and was overjoyed. She immediately found Alan and told him the good news that she could still have children. Faced with Anne's straightforwardness, Alan was shocked. But he was also very happy that Anne was being honest with him. Since Jack learned that Anne was dating Alan, he regretted telling Alan that he had no interest in Anne. For this reason, Jack got drunk every day. When Anne came home and saw him, she planned to carry him into the house. However, she unexpectedly sat on Jack's body. A sweet smell spread through the air. Luckily, Jack fell asleep at the critical moment and let out a sigh of relief, facing this embarrassing situation, and was a little at a loss. Just then, a little boy appeared. Upon asking, she learned that the little boy was Jack's 13-year-old son, Tom. Seeing the two of them sitting in an intimate position, he asked Anne if a man and a woman lying together would be able to have a baby, and hurriedly explained that giving birth in the hallway was technically difficult. She told Tom not to worry about it, as it was impossible. Then the two of them worked together to carry Jack into the room. Just as Anne was about to leave and go home, Tom said he wanted to buy her a drink before she left. After some chatting, and learned that Jack had not had a girlfriend in over 10 years. He had been raising his child all alone, and felt great sympathy for him in an instant. The next day, Tom told his father what had happened the night before, recalling that he had almost made a big mistake. Jack suddenly felt remorseful. However, he didn't expect to run into Anne as soon as he left the house. Jack had to pretend to have amnesia, but Anne suddenly asked him if he was lonely. Jack felt very guilty after hearing this and lied that he didn't know what she was talking about, and then handed him a business card. She said that if he ever felt lonely, he should come to their company. She would find Jack a wonderful remarried partner. Looking at the business card in his hand, Jack suddenly felt so embarrassed that he wanted to bite his tongue and kill himself. Soon after, it was Anne's best friend Amy's wedding, and was so envious of the two of them being so sweet at the wedding. But who would have thought that as soon as the two newlyweds finished their vows, a group of women rushed into the wedding venue, and these women were all the groom's ex-girlfriends. These girlfriends came from all over the world. Amy looked at these united girlfriends and was at a loss for words. Anne and the other girlfriends were also stunned, but Amy still managed to hold back and finished the wedding. After the wedding was over, the two newlyweds immediately lived a harmonious and happy married life in the hotel, as Amy also had a very brilliant emotional experience. Anne and the other girlfriends were not very surprised by such a big scene, and then went to the hotel restaurant to find someone. But the ex-boyfriend of the chef pulled her aside, and then questioned her about whether she wanted to ruin her own future. He also ordered Anne not to appear in front of him again, and was very angry after hearing this and picked up her shoe and smashed it on her ex-boyfriend's head. And this scene happened to be witnessed by Jack. Seeing that the conflict between the two was about to be discovered by the reporters, Jack quickly stepped in to stop Anne, and told Anne's ex-boyfriend to leave. It turns out that not long ago, Anne heard that her ex-boyfriend was planning to propose, so she came to the restaurant where her ex-boyfriend was the chef in high spirits. What Anne didn't expect was that the person her ex-boyfriend was proposing to was her arch-rival, and was furious at that moment and immediately grabbed the food cover and threw it in her ex-boyfriend's face. And this was also captured by Jack, an entertainment reporter who tracked celebrity gossip. In order to prevent Anne from becoming the protagonist of the scandal, Jack has never made this affair public, but other gossip reporters have been following this matter. In order to prevent other reporters from discovering that scene, Jack forcibly stopped Anne. Afterwards, and completely put her ex-boyfriend out of her mind, and she and Alan began a shameless and passionate love life. However, when Alan went on a date, all he did was watch movies or eat. Anne's lips were almost covered in moss. The two had never even kissed. In order for the two to develop further, she invited her boyfriend to her house for this date, and not only carefully decorated her home, lit romantic candles and put on sexy clothes. After everything was ready, Anne heard a knock on the door, but when she opened the door, it wasn't her boyfriend. Jack was looking for Anne to discuss a primary school reunion, but when he saw Anne dressed up like this, Jack immediately understood. Jack immediately made sarcastic comments about her, and felt very discouraged when she heard it. Without saying a word, she sent Jack back. This made Jack suddenly feel jealous. Coincidentally, Alan arrived at the apartment at this time. Jack hurriedly ran out the door and greeted Alan enthusiastically. Alan said he was there to see Anne. They would catch up later, but Jack was not to be denied, and he dragged Alan into a deep discussion of their brotherly bond. At Jack's heartfelt entreaty, Alan entered Anne's apartment without hesitation. The two then drank old Coca-Cola in a romantic atmosphere. They watched a love movie with no action with relish. As the ambiguous atmosphere grew stronger, the air grew drier, so the two immediately wanted to replenish each other's moisture. But just then Jack played a message bomb. Seeing the beautiful atmosphere being destroyed, Alan turned off his phone without saying a word, and then the two launched another attack on each other. But just then Anne's dog pulled on Alan's pant leg. Facing such an embarrassing situation, Anne was very depressed. She lifted her leg and gave a kick. The puppy immediately ran away, and then the two launched a third attack. But just then the doorbell rang again. The two were suddenly speechless. They wanted to ignore it, but the doorbell kept ringing, and had no choice but to open the door. She was surprised to see Jack standing there, panting and holding a tray of fried chicken, and was furious and wanted to teach him a lesson. But in the end, she had no choice but to invite Jack in. Once they were safely inside, Jack immediately demanded that they drink. With Jack stirring things up, the romantic atmosphere between the two was completely destroyed. Since then, Anne and Alan have never gone any further than holding hands. In contrast, her best friend Ella had only been dating her boyfriend for less than a week, and the two were already spending every day together. This made Anne feel more and more envious. Ella also began to mock Anne, and said that she had either lost her feminine charm, or that Alan was just not interested in certain things. After hearing this, Anne became even more anxious. Just when she didn't know what to do, the young girl who had previously competed with her for the right to be Alan's spouse came to her, and didn't want to pay any attention to her. But the young girl told her some explosive information, that Alan's ex-wife was also a gynecologist at the same hospital, and perked up immediately upon hearing this. In order to find out Alan's situation, she pretended to be sick every day to get close to Alan's ex-wife. After repeated attempts, Alan's ex-wife soon understood Anne's intentions. In order to prevent Anne from harassing her, Alan's ex-wife said that the reason for their divorce was simply because Alan was too passive. After learning that Alan was a normal man, Anne decided to take the initiative again. For this reason, she learned a lot of magic tricks that are suitable for dating. However, when the date was approaching, Alan was unable to come because of a sudden emergency. Coincidentally, Jack saw Anne practicing magic. Jack suggested that he practice on her first, so Anne began to perform. But unexpectedly, she accidentally set herself on fire. Jack quickly grabbed a glass of water and splashed it at her, but it was useless, so he had to pick up a jug of water and pour it down. The fire instantly went out. However, looked like a drowned rat. Jack then drove in home. When they arrived at the garage, Jack saw that and was shivering with cold, so he took off his jacket and put it on and to warm it up, Jack rubbed her arms. However, no one expected that Alan had seen it all. He suddenly felt jealous. Anne and Alan greeted each other warmly, but Alan's face was expressionless. Then he took off Jack's jacket and put on his own, before dragging Anne away. Jack was embarrassed in the face of his actions. When they returned to Anne's house, Alan was still upset about what he had just seen. Seeing a bag on the table, Alan asked what it was, as it contained magic props. Han Meng felt embarrassed and said it was nothing. However, Alan continued to press her for the reason why she was with Jack, and felt very disappointed after hearing this. She asked Alan if he wasn't curious about why she was in such a mess. Alan then realized that he had been so angry that he had neglected to care about Anne. He hurriedly asked Anne what had happened. At this point, Anne was already very unhappy, so she said she wanted to take a shower and go to bed, and asked Alan to go home first. Alan didn't say anything after hearing this and got up to leave. His actions made Anne feel even more that the other person didn't care about her at all. In contrast, Jack sent Anne cold medicine. And became more suspicious of whether Alan really liked her. But the next day, Anne began to feel that she was being oversensitive. She wanted to call Alan and talk to him, but then she thought that she shouldn't take the initiative, and was looking forward to Alan calling her. But she didn't receive a call from Alan all day. In the evening, Anne drank wine while crying to her best friend Ella. And Ella also said that she shouldn't take the initiative to confess, because once a woman takes the initiative to confess, the ownership of the relationship will be handed over to the man. In this way, men will not cherish women. After hearing Ella's analysis, the more Anne thought about it, the more she felt that it made sense. Therefore, she became even more desperate. However, what Anne didn't know was that the next day at work, her ex-wife found Alan. The ex-wife told Alan that she had seen Anne. Alan was very unhappy when he learned about it, so he also tried to contact Anne. After Anne hung up with Ella, and realized that Alan had actually called her many times, she instantly wanted to die. Coincidentally, Alan called again, and didn't say a word and just ran out. When she sat down, Alan took out an earplug and put it in her ear. He said not to listen to what other people say. Then Alan took out a sticker he had treasured for many years. It was a souvenir from when Anne was still a member of a girl group, and was very moved after seeing it. Alan took the opportunity to tell her that although she had confessed her love first, he had liked her for 13 years, so Anne didn't need to worry about his love. After Alan's heartfelt confession, Anne finally let go of her worries. To celebrate this beautiful moment, the two of them were going to drink water to replenish each other. But at that moment, Anne remembered that she had just eaten squid, so she quickly stopped her impulsive behavior. Alan thought he had done something wrong, and the little pepper immediately softened, and Anne also felt very embarrassed. After going home, she immediately started brushing her teeth like crazy. She regretted that she had missed the first intimate contact in the months they had been dating. Soon it was time for another date. This time, Anne accidentally discovered Alan's credit card billing information. Alan also told Anne without any hesitation that he still owed a lot of loans. After hearing this, Anne said on the surface that she didn't mind, but in her heart she was very panicked. So much so that when she went to work the next day, she was still thinking about Alan's debt. She felt that her whole being was unsettled, but she still comforted herself that love was more important than anything else. But just then Alan sent her a text message telling her to work hard and make money. He also said that a woman who can make money is even sexier, and almost wet her pants after reading it. However, what she didn't know was that this was just Alan joking with him. Just as Anne was restless and anxious, Jack's son Tom found their company. Faced with Tom's sudden visit, Anne was very surprised, and asked him why he was here. Tom then took out the passbook his father gave him. He asked Anne to find his father a remarriage partner, and saw that the child was so sincere in wanting to help his father and said that she would help for free. But Tom said that he didn't like receiving free help from others. He insisted on giving Anne the passbook, and had no choice but to accept it. That night, Tom told his father that there was a volunteer activity tomorrow and hoped that he would participate together. Jack felt that it was no problem and immediately agreed. However, when it came to the next day, a colleague said that a celebrity had appeared at the bridal shop and asked him to hurry over. Just as Tom arrived, and knocked on the door, and placed the beauties she had selected on the table for Tom to choose from. The stepmother, unexpectedly, wasn't satisfied with any of them, because he only liked stepmothers who hadn't had plastic surgery, and said that this request was simply impossible. And Tom had to lower his standards and said that he could barely accept a stepmother with a nose and eyes that had been surgically altered, and felt a bit embarrassed after hearing this, but still promised to help Tom find someone. After the introduction was over, Tom said that he had to go to the volunteer activity. After learning that he was going alone, and also wanted to go with him. The two of them then went to the volunteer activity together. The old geeks quickly recognized Anne as a former girl group member. They all cast approving glances. This made Anne feel very proud, but her appearance made the homeroom teacher, who liked Tom's father, feel jealous. The homeroom teacher kept finding in trouble while working. On the other side, Jack rushed to the wedding dress shop and realized that it was a colleague who made a mistake. This made him very unhappy after scolding his colleague. Jack also came to the activity site. Seeing that Anne was also helping, he was very moved. So during the rest of the event, Jack kept helping Anne secretly. When the event ended, Jack found that Anne had sprained her ankle, which made him feel very bad. So when they returned to the underground parking lot, Jack insisted on carrying Anne home, but Anne refused. But Jack still wanted to force a Princess Carrie and carried her home. However, no one expected that Alan saw it, and instantly felt great jealousy in his heart. It turned out that Jack was a college student, but he brought his child to class, while everyone else was enjoying their youth. He was just feeding his child, and it was all Jack's handsome face's fault, because he was so handsome. As soon as he entered school, he was chased after by girls. Soon he reaped the rewards of a sweet love. However, they didn't realize that they would soon taste the forbidden fruit. What's worse is that the girl accidentally died in a difficult birth, and the girl's brother blamed Jack for his sister's death. If it weren't for dating a scumbag like Jack, his sister wouldn't have died young. The man also warned Jack not to date other women in the future, because he would only end up hurting someone else. Since then, Jack's life has undergone earth-shattering changes. He has become depressed and lost the courage to live. All of this has also been seen by his best friend Alan. Alan encouraged him to think about the livelihood of his child. If not for himself, with Alan's encouragement, Jack finally regained hope. In fact, Alan also deeply loved his late girlfriend, but in order to make them happy, Alan chose to give up. However, no one expected that many years later, they would fall in love with and at the same time. Seeing his girlfriend being held in the arms of his best friend, Alan wanted to rush up and fight with Jack for 300 rounds, but in the end, he held back, and Jack carried Anne all the way home. Then he put Anne on the sofa. Then he brought a basin of water for Anne to apply to her feet. Anne wanted to refuse, but Jack insisted, so Anne had to put her big feet in it. Seeing such a warm-hearted Jack and recalling his hardships as a single parent, Anne's heart was suddenly filled with compassion and she couldn't help reaching out to stroke Jack's head, and her action completely broke Jack's defenses. But Jack still maintained his composure. He took Anne's hand away, and said to Anne not to reach out to him, because if she did, he would be unable to resist, and he would want to hold on to her. Anne's heart instantly swelled, but she knew she couldn't. Jack hurriedly got up and left while Tom was home. Meanwhile, Alan kept trying to contact Anne, but she never answered the phone. He felt very uneasy and angry inside. He wanted to rush upstairs and talk to the two of them about the importance of a harmonious society, but at the critical moment, he hesitated, because Alan was afraid that the consequences of doing so would be even worse. In the end, he had to give up. On the other side, a colleague accidentally found Anne's photo on Jack's computer. It was then that Yanni realized that Jack had been deliberately helping Anne, and saw that Jack had given up such a big name and fortune to help Anne. Yanni immediately understood that Jack liked Anne, and since she also liked Jack, she took revenge on Anne. So Yanni planned to make this scandal public. Jack learned about it and immediately argued with her. After Jack's intervention, Yanni finally did not make the news public, but this incident made Jack see his own heart. In order to compete for the scarce right to a spouse, so he ran recklessly to Alan, and threatened to compete with him for the scarce right to a spouse. However, Alan was not at all flustered. He slowly told Jack not to be impulsive by reasoning. This approach would not only result in a beating, but also hurt all three people in the current love triangle. What's more, the person he liked would hate him for it. Most importantly, it would also disrupt the stable development of a harmonious society. Under Alan's earnest teachings full of positive energy, Jack immediately realized his mistake, so he had to give up the idea of forcibly competing for the right to a spouse. Alan's ex-wife Lucy saw all this, so she encouraged Jack to express his feelings to Anne, because that was the only way to find out whose feelings were more important to Anne. Jack went to the door of Anne's matchmaking company, and, after a fierce battle with his emotions, went inside. While Jack was waiting, he heard a woman nearby complaining about how bad men with children were, and how they were a burden to women who remarried, because no woman wanted to be the stepmother of someone else's child. After listening to the woman's words, Jack became more and more afraid. In order not to cause trouble for Alan and Anne, Jack quickly gave up the idea of confessing his love. Then he left without saying a word. Not long after he left, and heard that he had just been here, facing Jack's behavior of coming and going, and felt very strange. So after work, Anne found Jack, and asked him why he had come and gone. Jack had to say that it was because of something temporary at the company. At this time, Anne remembered Jack holding her hand, and asked him why he did that at the time. Jack was so nervous after hearing this that he didn't know what to do. He quickly explained that it had been a long time since a woman had touched his head, so he had reacted a bit strongly and shouldn't take it too seriously, and didn't know what to say after hearing this, just as the atmosphere was getting a bit awkward. And handed Jack the passbook that Tom had given her. She also told Jack about the things Tom had asked her to help with. She then went on to persuade Jack to pursue his own happiness, because only when you are happy can those around you also be happy. After hearing this, Jack felt a mixture of emotions. When she got home, she looked at her sleeping child and the passbook in her hands, and shed tears of sadness. In order to live up to her child's expectations, Jack went to see Anne the next day. He asked Anne to help him find a suitable partner. On the other hand, since Jack threatened to compete with Alan for a spouse, Alan became increasingly uneasy. What made him even more unbearable was that the more Anne mentioned Jack when they went on dates, Alan hurriedly pressed his thick lips against Anne's in order to prevent her from continuing to talk about Jack, and made Anne think only of herself and not Jack. Seeing Alan so affectionate, Anne had no choice but to agree. However, when it came time to eat the next day, Anne brought up Jack again. She hoped Alan could give her some information, but this time Alan completely lost his temper. He directly and angrily told Anne to stop talking about Jack. At this point, Anne realized that the kiss Alan had given her before, which she had thought was romantic, was just to shut her up, and was very angry when she learned this, so she argued with Alan, and the two eventually broke up. However, what no one expected was that shortly after the argument, Anne wanted to find Alan to have a good chat, but instead she saw him intimately helping his ex-wife blow the sand out of her eyes, and his ex-wife was still confessing to Alan that she hoped they would get back together, and was instantly unnerved when she saw this scene. And Alan also quickly noticed Anne, and both were stunned the moment their eyes met. Afterwards, Anne questioned Alan why he was so intimate with his ex-wife. Alan explained that he was just helping his ex-wife remove the sand from her eyes, and that nothing had happened between them. However, Anne believed that since they were already dating, they should avoid any suspicion. Alan should also stick to his responsibilities. He still felt that Anne was being overly sensitive, and believed that they still wanted to get back together. Alan angrily turned around and left, and hoped that Alan would suddenly come after her and make up. But in the end, she could only leave alone in disappointment, and then went to the bar alone. Recalling her failed romantic experiences over the past few years, drinking was the only thing that could calm her heartache. Meanwhile, Alan returned to the hospital and his ex-wife came up to greet him. Alan then scolded his ex-wife, telling her to stay away from him next time. On the other side, Jack officially started his blind date arranged by Anne. Thanks to his outstanding good looks, the blind date went very well. But just then, Yanni, who liked him, deliberately caused trouble. The angry blind date left directly. Jack was about to lose his temper, but Yanni instead questioned why Jack would rather find a divorced woman than her. Jack had no choice but to confess that he had no feelings for her, even though they had known each other for over 10 years. Jack had never once felt a thing for her. He hoped that Yanni would stop pining for him. Yanni was very sad to hear this, but in the end she could only accept it helplessly. Jack then returned home. Just then he discovered Anne, who was drunk, collapsed in the hallway, so he planned to move Anne to her room. Then Jack was cleaning up the vomit on the floor. When he returned to the room, he saw Anne wearing only a bikini. Jack was shocked. Without saying a word, he helped Anne cover up. The next day Anne was awakened by the phone. She answered the phone in a daze. After listening carefully, she realized it was Alan looking for her, but then she realized that she was actually in Jack's house. What's worse is that Alan is still blocking her front door. Seeing that Alan is about to misunderstand, Anne immediately asked Alan back with a clever question. Yesterday they just had a fight. Why are you coming to see me now? Alan immediately replied after hearing this, it is precisely because of the fight. That's why he is here now to ask for forgiveness. Hearing Alan's answer, which was so irrefutable, Anne wanted to die, so she immediately said that she would not forgive so easily. She told Alan to come back tomorrow and the day after that. Only by coming back 3 days in a row would he get her forgiveness. Alan had no choice but to do as she said. After Alan left, and realized she was still wearing her simple pajamas, she let out a squeal of frustration. Her voice woke Jack up. When Jack came into the living room, and was about to leave, seeing Jack, and hurriedly asked why she was in her house. Jack told her about how she had vomited last night after getting drunk, but Anne questioned why he had undressed her after carrying her home. Jack became even more angry and said that he had not done so. He also said that he had a child at home and hoped that Anne could behave herself, and was so embarrassed that she left immediately. Later, she gathered with her girlfriends. However, her girlfriends were all frowning. Amy saw that everyone was very unhappy, so she said that her husband's 6 ex-girlfriends had caused a scene at their wedding ceremony not long ago. she was not bothered. Ella complained that she had not only been cheated on by a man for money and sex, but that the man was also married, and said that her boyfriend was having an affair with his ex-wife. Just when everyone felt really bad for themselves, Mary said that she had breast cancer. Everyone fell silent. Mary told them not to comfort her, because she only wanted to hear positive encouragement. The girlfriends didn't say much after that, but that night they went to Mary's house. They continued to drink and laugh. They encouraged Mary to face it bravely. This scene is perhaps the most sincere sisterly love. Mary then underwent surgery with her girlfriends. The surgery went very well, and after this surgery, Mary and her husband's tense relationship also eased. Soon after, it was the day of Jack and Anne's elementary school reunion. Jack suggested that the two of them carpool. Soon the two arrived at the school, and the main event of this reunion was to open the time capsule from that year, and give the contents to the children who are currently attending the school. When it was Jack's turn to give the children the things he had kept, Jack hesitated, because the contents were the gift he had given to Anne. So he lied and said that the contents were restricted items that were not suitable for children. In the evening, due to heavy snowfall, the road back to the city was blocked, and the two were trapped at the school. Under the arrangement of the teacher, they decided to stay for one night before leaving. However, what the two never expected was that they were actually arranged to stay in the same room. Faced with this arrangement, Anne immediately questioned how the school could have done such an unreasonable thing as to let boys and girls mix. Jack, on the other hand, thought that he was pure and kind and didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. However, Anne asked him in return if he was really so pure. Why did he watch restricted content when he was 10 years old, and have a child just after entering university? Jack replied that he was just a little sausage who didn't listen, and heard that she wanted to go to the bathroom. Jack originally said that he would go with her, but Anne said that she felt that Jack was even more terrifying, and insisted on going alone. After the memory was cleared, she looked at the elementary school she hadn't been to in over 10 years, and suddenly felt like visiting. She then walked into the science lab. Just as Anne was looking around, the light suddenly went out. She thought it was Jack playing a prank on her, but after calling out for a long time, no one answered, and panicked instantly. However, Jack on the other side realized that there was a power outage. Just as he asked what was going on, he suddenly heard Anne scream, so he hurriedly ran over to the sound. It was then that he realized Anne had fainted in shock. Jack then took Anne back to her room and called the doctor, but after examining her, the doctor said Anne was fine. Jack didn't understand what that meant, so he had to send the doctor away. Then Jack sat down next to Anne. As he watched her sleep, memories of his childhood suddenly came flooding back. 24 years ago, when Jack and Anne were acting out a lover's scene, there was a little girl in the audience who wouldn't let the two of them kiss, so he gave Jack an apple coated in laxative, which caused Jack to run off the stage without kissing Anne at the crucial moment. Anne became the laughingstock of the whole school ever since. Afterwards, Jack always wanted to apologize to Anne, but never found the right opportunity. By chance, Jack learned that Anne liked a toy jewelry box in the convenience store. He planned to buy the box as a token of love, but the owner told him that the box was not for sale. Jack had no choice but to use 100 game tokens to buy it. After unremitting efforts, he finally won 100 game tokens. When he put the game tokens in front of the boss was shocked and almost peed his pants. But after Jack got the box, he moved to the United States and never got to give it to her, so he had to put the box in a time capsule. Facing this past, Jack felt very sorry. While Anne was asleep, Jack told her about his childhood crush. Then he lamented how happy it was that fate had reunited them. But just as he fell in love with Anne again, and became her brother's girlfriend, and Jack felt heartbroken. After this outpouring of feelings, Jack left the room. Then he put the engagement rings from their fake marriage into the jewelry box, to commemorate their lost fate. What he didn't know was that the doctor had actually been tactfully telling him that and was just pretending to be asleep. All of his confessions were heard by Anne, and Anne was instantly swayed after hearing it, but she pretended not to hear it and planned to keep this secret deep in her heart. On the other hand, Alan had been vaguely uneasy after learning that Jack and Anne were trapped in the school. In order not to let his girlfriend be snatched away by someone else, he drove the Mercedes to the school overnight. When the two were about to leave the next day, June also happened to arrive, so Anne left Jack behind and went home with Alan. After returning home, Alan questioned Anne that he had seen Anne and Jack together many times. "You know you'll be unhappy when you see it, but why can't you just keep your distance?" Anne felt aggrieved after hearing this. She asked Alan in return, "Jack is your good friend, your neighbor and your primary school classmate." She simply didn't know how to keep her distance. Alan became even more angry after hearing this. "If you continue like this, it will be difficult for me to open up to you, because I'm afraid of getting hurt. Anne was very sad after hearing this and said that she was different from you. She has always opened her heart to Alan, but Alan asked her if she only had herself in her heart. This question made Anne silent. This conversation also created a gap in the relationship between the two. Jack returned home and found that the jewelry and toy box were gone. Just as he was looking around, he received a call from a colleague. He learned that Yanni was about to leave his job, so he hurried to the company. But when he was about to leave, he met Alan, who was just leaving, so he planned to explain to Alan about going back to school with Anne. However, Alan didn't want to hear it at all. Then Jack went to the company and comforted Yanni, who had just resigned. In order not to hurt Jack's feelings, Yanni deleted the news about him being in a love triangle with celebrity Lily. After she left the company, the colleague in charge of handing over to her found the photos she had organized in the recycle bin. Jack, in order not to disturb Alan and Anne, actively participated in matchmaking activities. He thought he had opened up a new world, but instead, he was taken in turn by a group of women with high levels of estrogen. After this intimate interaction, his body almost couldn't hold out, and this made Jack feel very frustrated. Just as he wanted to talk to Anne about it, he found that a man was causing trouble at Anne's company, so Jack decisively intervened and drove the other man away. This made Anne feel anxious and uneasy. In order not to let her thoughts run wild, Anne simply put Alan's photo in all the frames in her house, and felt a little more at ease when she was lying among the pile of Alan's photos. It so happened that she learned that Alan was sick, so Anne rushed to Alan's house to take care of him, while cooking porridge for Alan, and accidentally cut herself. But she didn't complain, and early the next morning she brought breakfast to Alan's house, and was going to give Alan energy. But she didn't expect Alan to get better and go to work without even calling her to let her know. This made Anne feel an inexplicable sense of loss. On the way back, she remembered that her feet hurt from the heels every time they went on a date, but Alan never once cared. The more Anne thought about it, the worse she felt. Then she returned to her apartment and happened to run into Jack. The two didn't say much, but Jack quickly noticed her injured hand, and before leaving, he also concernedly asked her to wear more comfortable shoes. After comparing the two, Anne immediately felt that her feelings for Alan were one-sided. Not long after, the celebrity Lily's ex-boyfriend and Anne's boyfriend caused Lily to miscarry. At the same time, photos of Anne and Lily fighting for the right to be a spouse were also exposed. In order to cover up the fact that Lily had stolen Anne's boyfriend, the talent agency framed Anne as the mistress, and was instantly thrust into the limelight. Lily's fans immediately launched an attack on Anne. Just then, Jack stepped forward and firmly protected Anne under his chest. Indifferent to whatever the fans threw at him, under Jack's protection, and successfully avoided the fans' siege. Jack then took Anne home. To prevent the vicious public opinion from harming Anne, not only did he unplug the TV signal cable, but also turned off her computer and phone, and told her to rest for a day and not to watch anything. With Jack's comfort, and finally calmed down from the shock. Then Jack went to the company, and angrily questioned his colleagues why they had published the photos he took. Seeing Jack getting more and more agitated as he spoke, the boss personally stepped forward and said that he had given the order. However, what he didn't expect was that Jack became even more irritable after learning this. Not only did he scold all his relatives, he also smashed an innocent trash can to pieces. Then Jack angrily tendered his resignation. This action scared the boss and he didn't know what to do. On the other side, Alan also saw Anne's false accusations trending on the internet. He immediately went to Anne's home. Then he took Anne to the temple to appreciate the beauty of nature and soothe her mood. While they were enjoying the flowers and the moonlight, Jack started to organize the materials to clear Anne's name. However, before he could finish writing the clarifying article, Anne encountered an even bigger crisis. Their company had a problem introducing a rich grandmother to a man, but after they got together, they disappeared without a trace. The rich grandmother's son then took them to the police and accused them of fraud. And didn't believe it at first, but the police told her that all the information they gave the rich grandmother about her potential husband was fake. What's more, the man had also transferred a huge sum of money to Anne's company, and just couldn't explain it no matter how hard she tried. When she returned to the company, she encountered even more trouble. Another member's wife had run off with the money. With these two fraud scandals brewing, many members came to the company to cause trouble. Facing these unexpected events one after another, Anne felt physically and mentally exhausted. She simply didn't know how to solve them, and all of this was also seen by Jack. He immediately asked a colleague to help find out the whereabouts of the rich granny. Then he handed the news of helping Anne clear her name to his boss, and told the boss to release it to the public, otherwise he would really resign. Then he came to Anne's side again and kept encouraging her. Jack told her not to worry and said he would always be by her side. At this point, Anne had already suffered too many blows and her body could not take it anymore. She fainted as soon as she returned home. Fortunately, Jack happened to come to the door at this time and wanted to talk to her about the gossip. After he realized that something was wrong, He immediately called the security guard to open the door. When he saw Anne fainting on the ground, Jack was terrified. He quickly took Anne to the hospital. Seeing the doctors frantically treating Anne, Jack was extremely worried. Alan also quickly discovered that Jack had taken Anne to the hospital to fight for the scarce right of spouse. Alan immediately came forward to stop Jack and said that he would take care of Anne, asking Jack to hurry home. But Jack said that he was not free to fight for the right of spouse with his best friend. He only cared about the safety of the woman. Alan was stunned after hearing this and had to let Jack stay by inside. Soon after, and finally recovered, and Jack's emotions were not as intense, so he apologized to Alan, saying that he should not have been so emotional just now, and asked Alan to take care of him before going home himself. However, Alan felt very uncomfortable after hearing this. He was clearly the real boyfriend. Now it sounded like he needed someone else's authorization to exercise his rights as a spouse. But Jack didn't care about his feelings at all. He finished talking and left on his own. Then he rushed to the airport to go to Hong Kong to find out where his rich grandmother was. Meanwhile, the news that Jack had clarified for and also hit the top of the search results. For a while, the keyboard warriors, who had always been shameless, suddenly had noble sentiments. They all turned around to scold Anne's ex-boyfriend and celebrity Lily, seeing that she had finally been vindicated, and wept with joy. Shortly afterwards, the rich old woman who had disappeared from the face of the earth also returned to the country. Facing Anne's questioning, the rich old woman revealed the reason for her disappearance. It turned out that, through Anne's introduction, she had met the current handsome old man, but handsome old man went bankrupt. The rich old woman's son believed that handsome old man was after the rich old woman's fortune and kept getting in the way, but the rich woman insisted that the handsome old man was sincere with her, so she asked the handsome old man to forge some information, in this way to prevent her son from interfering with their sweet love affair in their twilight years. But she never expected that it would cause Anne so much trouble. If it weren't for Jack's earnest advice, they would still not know. So they returned to China this time to help and clear the accusation of fraud, learning that Jack had done all this for her quietly, and was once again overwhelmed, while at the same time Jack had fallen into great trouble because of the news article he wrote clarifying the matter. Celebrity Lily's scandal was suddenly thrust into the limelight. Lily's fans felt that Jack was deliberately smearing her, so the fans blocked the entrance to Jack's company every day. And the boss of Lily's agency didn't let Jack off the hook either. He came to the company every day to make trouble. He even threatened to tell Soo Hyuk that it was slander, and make Jack compensate for all the losses they had suffered. What's more, Jack was unable to appear in public at all, and whenever he is seen by Lily's fans, he is beaten up, and has seen all this. Seeing Jack suffer so much for her, and knowing that she can do nothing to help, and feels very sad. In the evening, the two meet in the park in the residential area. Recalling all that Jack has done for her, and knows that her heart is full, she starts to move closer to Jack, but at this critical moment, and chooses to back off. But how can you control your feelings for someone? Alan saw it all. At that moment, he felt like the third party. He didn't know what to do, so Alan went to the bar to get drunk. Then he wandered downstairs to Anne's apartment. He wanted to contact Anne but didn't have the courage. His lonely figure was just seen by Jack upstairs, so Jack came to his side. Seeing Jack actually dare to stand in front of him, Alan immediately grabbed Jack by the collar. He asked Jack why he had to make him the poor third party, and Jack said he couldn't control his heart. Alan was very angry after hearing this. He immediately stroked Jack's handsome face. Then he pointed angrily at Jack on the ground, and told Jack to quickly disappear from his sight. At the same time, in addition to his good friend Alan, Jack was also not well received in front of many colleagues at the company, because he offended the largest domestic talent agency. Many colleagues encountered a lot of resistance at work, so they vented all their dissatisfaction on Jack. This caused Jack to lose faith in his longtime passion of journalism, and he began to think about quitting his job as a journalist. On the other hand, Alan and Anne's relationship reached an impasse. They no longer felt any joy when they went out on dates. This made Alan increasingly uneasy. In order to win Anne back, he took her to a restaurant that had shocked the world. Then he directly put the engagement ring on the table, and asked Anne to open it and take a look. Facing this sudden scene, Anne panicked instantly, because she had already given her heart to Jack, so she had to keep apologizing to Alan. She wanted to confess to Alan directly, but Alan didn't let her continue. Then Alan left depressed, and then went home alone. When she returned to the bottom of the building, a kind and affable uncle wanted to play a little game with her. Jack saw this and immediately chased the uncle away. He wanted to go up to comfort Anne, but unexpectedly Anne became emotional when she saw him, and angrily asked him in tears why he always interfered in her life. Why does he keep popping up and disturbing her peace of mind? Seeing that Anne is suffering so much because of him, and remembering that he has also hurt Alan, Jack makes a decision that goes against his moral principles. He plans to move abroad with his son and live with his parents. Meanwhile, and is persuaded by her best friend to confess her feelings to Alan, but Alan deliberately avoids her. So she has to go to the hospital where Alan works. Seeing and so determined, Alan has no choice but to break up with her first, facing this situation, and felt very sorry for Alan, and after saying a lot of apologetic things to Alan, and returned the engagement ring to him, and the romantic relationship between the two came to an end, after breaking up with Alan, and returned to her quiet life. But just then, she was informed by Mary that Jack had left the magazine. She immediately ran home, but found that Jack was no longer there, so and could only ring Jack's doorbell every day. She was looking forward to Jack's miraculous appearance. When they met again, it was a long time later, one day, and was waiting for the elevator. Unexpectedly, the moment the elevator door opened, she actually saw her long-lost but always thought of sweetheart, and was suddenly so overwhelmed that she didn't know what to do. She almost fell, but Jack was quick and caught her in his arms. The two were both incredibly excited to be reunited, but they both suppressed their feelings at the same time, because neither knew if the other would still accept them. In this state of indecision, the two of them once again entered a state of entanglement, and since Jack returned, and has been distracted, even at work, she is distracted. Mary soon noticed this problem, so she advised her to boldly tell Jack her thoughts, and felt that she had made Jack disappear from her eyes. Now how can she open her mouth and let someone come back? She can only continue to suffer while drinking. Meanwhile, Jack found Alan. He thanked Alan for calling him back. Alan had been suffering ever since he broke up with Anne. He wanted to win and back, but saw that and was always thinking about Jack. In order to stop Anne from suffering, he made a decision that went against the family tradition. Now the two brothers meet again. Jack feels very sorry for Alan, and Alan also has a lot of grievances against Jack. In order to vent his emotions, Alan took Jack to the children's playground in the hospital, and the two of them happily played a game of tag. After a while, a group of kids armed with water pistols joined in the fight. The two best friends immediately abandoned the past and covered for each other. After such a harmonious and beautiful interaction, Alan and Jack also reached a reconciliation, facing such sincere brotherly love, and was extremely gratified. Soon after, Jack was drinking with his former colleagues to reminisce. However, he accidentally got drunk, so his colleagues carried Jack back to the community. This scene happened to be witnessed by Anne, and wanted to go up and say hello, but she was stopped by the security guard, who asked if she knew the colleague, and felt puzzled after hearing this. The security guard explained that he had noticed the man following Anne, and was even more confused after hearing this, so she asked her colleague what was going on. After some explanation, and finally understood, it turned out that although Jack had gone to China, he was still worried about her safety, so he had asked his colleague to secretly protect Anne. After learning that Jack had been guarding her side, and instantly felt happy, she decided to stop hiding and boldly told Jack how she felt. She hoped that Jack would run to her. After hearing this, Jack immediately rushed to her without any hesitation. The two then started to mix together like crazy. In this way, the two also began to officially date. Then they started their shameless love life. However, what Anne didn't expect was that the tribulations between them had just begun. Before Anne was ready, Jack's childhood sweetheart Sarah barged in between them, so the battle between the two women for the right to the scarce spouse began. With a whistle, the two women began a cooking competition. They both held their breath, neither willing to concede to the other. In order to make Jack's son recognize them, the two women also used all their skills. The strong tension also made the father and son look dumbfounded, and this time they both chose to make the same dish. Soon the two of them set the finished dishes in front of the father and son. Tom first ate the dish Anne had made, but after taking a bite, he said Anne's dish was very ordinary and had no highlights at all, and almost had a heart attack when she heard this. When it was Sarah's turn to eat, Tom said it was very delicious, and that he looked forward to it in the future. Sarah was so happy she didn't know what to do. She immediately cast a look of victoriously at Anne. On the other hand, was dejected and didn't know what to do. After returning home, Anne felt even worse than if she had eaten 2 caddies of garlic. The more she thought about it, the more she felt aggrieved. So she went over to ask Tom to point out what was wrong with what she had made. Tom pondered for a moment before revealing the real reason. In fact, the ingredients Anne had brought had expired. After eating her cooking, her father had vomited and had the runs, and was terrified when she heard this and immediately went inside to take care of Jack. With her careful attention, Jack gradually improved. Then, at Jack's request, and stayed by Jack's side all night, to thank Anne for her attentive care, Jack invited Anne to a restaurant for dinner at a huge expense. Faced with such a romantic and exaggerated dinner scene, Anne immediately felt giddy again. So on such a beautiful day, the two completely let go of themselves. The ridiculous Coke from 1982. After they got drunk, they went to a bag store and swept the entire display rack of bags. The salespeople were all stunned by this scene. They were suddenly flustered and started packing. However, When Anne woke up the next day, she was shocked to see the room full of bags. She regretted her actions, so she had no choice but to go back to the store with all the bags and return them. Seeing themselves being teased like this, the salespeople were furious, but since the customer was king, they had no choice but to comply. Although this was a bad shopping experience, it did not prevent their emotions from quickly heating up. In the evening, the two of them snuggled up together again. As the mood grew more and more intimate, the air also grew drier and drier. In order not to dehydrate each other, the two of them began to drink a lot of water to replenish each other. Since this part of the plot is not good, we will skip it directly. And then it was the next day. The two woke up on a sunny morning. At this point, the two of them had also reached an inseparable state of affection. But just then, Anne noticed that Tom's attitude towards her was very cold, and originally thought it was an illusion. But Tom kept doing this to her again and again. This made her worry. So in order to ease the relationship between the two, Han Mei followed behind Tom, planning to find a breakthrough. It was then that Anne realized that Tom was just missing his mother. After the misunderstanding was resolved, the two were finally happy together again. Soon after, on Tom's birthday, Jack invited Anne to dinner to meet his younger sister. So Anne eagerly bought a gift for Tom, but she didn't expect to run into her ex-husband. What's more surprising is that their routes were surprisingly the same. This made the two feel an ominous foreboding. When the two arrived at the restaurant, they were dumbfounded, because it turned out that Jack's sister was Anne's ex-husband's girlfriend, and both the woman and the ex-husband were dumbfounded. In order to prevent their partners from discovering that they had been married, the two had to pretend to know each other. But the two's extremely unnatural state was quickly noticed, so Anne had to lie and say that her ex-husband was her black fan, but she had long since quit the girl group, so they didn't know each other now and weren't strangers. Although this reason was extremely ridiculous, no one else pursued it further. After this awkward dinner, Anne was extremely anxious. She wanted to confess to Jack, but when the words were on the tip of her tongue, she couldn't say them, so she just sat there, fidgeting every day, constantly thinking about what she should do next, until finally she came up with a plan that was to negotiate with her ex-husband. She wanted her ex-husband to give up his current girlfriend, but unexpectedly, her ex-husband told her a cruel reality, that her ex-husband and Jack's sister would be getting married in a week's time, and that, according to the principle of first come, first served, Anne should give up. After understanding this cruel reality, Anne was suddenly desperate, because he loved Jack so much. She simply could not accept breaking up with Jack when things were getting better, so she had to make a difficult decision, and tell Jack about her ex-husband. She also sadly broke up with Jack, but what she didn't expect was that Jack told her the truth. It turned out that he and his ex-husband's girlfriend were not biological siblings. They just grew up together, because they were like family. They kept calling each other brother and sister. After learning that this was a big misunderstanding, Anne was finally relieved. She immediately dove into Jack's arms, and this scene was also witnessed by Sarah. She instantly knew that she no longer had a chance. After so many things happened, Jack also sought his own heart, so he called his friends to decorate the house properly. When Anne returned home from work, she saw Jack's carefully arranged romantic red carpet. As she followed the red carpet to Jack's front door, Jack and his son had been waiting for a long time. Then Jack took Anne on a trip down memory lane. Seeing all the things Jack had prepared for her, Anne's heart immediately fluttered. Taking this opportunity, Jack immediately took out a 2-kilogram diamond ring and got down on one knee to propose. But what he didn't expect was that Anne refused. Her reason was that she loved Jack too much. She was afraid of losing Jack. In order for the two of them to truly grow old together, and suggested that the two of them try marriage first. Jack was instantly confused after hearing this. He had wanted to convince Anne with Einstein's theory of relativity, but this had nothing to do with Newton's third law, so in the end, he could only accept. Then the two of them began their trial marriage. Jack had thought that after the two of them got together, they would live a carefree life, but after the two of them moved in together, he realized that Anne's life was very messy. She didn't like tidying up or doing the housework, and even threw the bones from the leftovers around, which caused more and more conflicts between the two. And finally Anne even packed her bags and moved back to her own home. Jack saw that things were getting worse, and he realized that the two needed to be tolerant of each other, so he went to Anne's side to apologize. And Anne also felt that she shouldn't be so willful, and she also admitted her mistakes to Jack, and the two once again reached a reconciliation. Just when their relationship was at a standstill, Jack had a car accident. When Anne saw the person in the hospital bed covered in gauze, she was devastated. She couldn't believe that Jack had become like this. However, the next second Jack stood behind her. It turned out that although Jack had a car accident, he only suffered minor injuries, and burst into tears of joy. After this thrilling event, Anne also made up her mind. Not long after, the couple Mary and his wife celebrated their reconciliation by getting married again. At the end of the wedding, Jack snatched the bouquet. He planned to propose to Anne again, but Anne stopped him forcefully, and instead proposed to him. Jack was ecstatic, and immediately picked Anne up, and the story ended there.